Thank you. We are excited to present today. I noticed that on the schedule, we were the only ones that didn't have last names. Did you notice that? It was just Dustin and Jeanine. So it's kind of like Sonny and Cher, Donnie and Marie, maybe Bonnie and Clyde, I don't know. But we're excited. Jeanine and I both run different businesses. Jeanine has Exodus. I have Calculated. We both, though, work with similar type clients and businesses. We just work with different stages of growth. You know, I'm more focused on the growth side of businesses, and then Jeanine's focused more on the later stages of exiting and transitioning out. And so that's kind of where we focus, but we find that we see similar obstacles as we work with businesses, and that's what we want to talk about today. There is a hidden ceiling with businesses when you're trying to grow, scale, and exit. There's a continuing problem that we find. Business is hard. The stats show that about 12% of working adults are entrepreneurial, that start some sort of business, earn some sort of revenue through their own entity. About half of those businesses ever get big enough where they have to hire an additional person. Less than 4% of businesses ever make it to 1 million in annual revenue. Less than 4%, 1 million in annual revenue. Less than 0.5% of businesses make it to 10 million in annual revenue. So it is tough, and there is a few obstacles and issues that we see over and over again, and that's what we want to talk about. And one of the biggest obstacles that we see is that the skill sets that it takes to launch a business and start a business, the virtues that you have when starting that business actually become your vice as you try to scale and exit. And that's what we're going to talk about, that you have to have a complete transition, a complete transformation, or you're going to be that statistic. You're going to be the majority of businesses that don't scale and don't get the significant exit that we have, that you want. So there's a trap, right? It's not that you're doing the wrong thing. It's that you're doing the wrong thing at the right thing at the wrong time. And one of the rules that we have with the businesses that we work with is you can't apologize. All the time I get businesses that are trying to scale, and they apologize for the way they've done things in the past. You know, that's the wrong attitude. They've actually were doing the right things at the right time. You know, when you start up a business, you should be running a business differently than when you're scaling or trying to exit. And so just because you're not doing it the right way for the stage that you're currently in doesn't mean you did it wrong earlier, if that makes sense. So when you're running a business or trying to scale a business, one of the key factors is to understand what stages of growth you're in, because you're going to run your business very differently depending on what stage of growth you're in. And that's one of the biggest obstacles you'll find, is that business owners don't understand the stage of growth they're in, and therefore they don't understand where their focus should be, where their resource allocation should be going, and where they should be putting all their momentum toward. If you're in those startup stages, those early startup stages, it's all about the hustle, the survival, the scrappiness. It's all about just DIY, getting in and doing it. It's about hard work and grit. When you move into those scale stages, it completely flips, and it now has to become about systems and clarity and teams and vision. And that transformation is very difficult. Just like a good warrior on the battlefield often will make a very poor general, right? A warrior, it's all about strength and speed and tactics. If you put that same person in the general seat, they'll fail unless they completely transform, because that general seat is all about strategy, more patience, teamwork, vision. And that's the mistake that the majority of businesses make. They start out as a warrior in the tough battlefield of a startup company, and then they never make that transformation to general. And so we want to dive deeper into this today and discuss the specific issues that we see companies have a hard time transforming around. So the first one we want to talk about is the startup strength of being founder-centric and how that can become your vice as you grow. When you first launch your business, it's all about you, and it has to be about you, right? The resources are limited. it's the wrong time to build the team. You got to just get in and do it yourself. And it's all about that grit. You're wearing all the many hats, right? You're the accountant, you're the marketer, you're the sales, you're the operations, you're the janitor. And it has to be that way because that's what's going to allow you to hold on to those tight resources and keep your cash, which you're going to need, right? And really help you focus. However, as soon as you start to get traction, as soon as you get product market fit and you start to get momentum in the marketplace, you have to quickly learn how to shift into a leadership model. And your goal quickly becomes to remove yourself out of the operations of the business as soon as possible, because that's how you're going to scale. And that's how you're going to create a lasting organization. And that has an impact on valuation.
This is probably the biggest issue that I see, even with companies that have managed to grow in revenue. We'll see $34 million companies that have such a owner-centric, everything running through the owner making all the decisions, owner's burnout, owner wants to sell. Everybody looks at the business and says, no, they're not gonna buy it. And so even if the seller is going to stay in the business for a few years, there's got to be some sort of succession planning before an exit to get that seller out of the operations, to transfer knowledge to other people in the business. It sometimes can work against you too, because there's times where you transfer too much to your employees and don't secure them, and then they take those relationships somewhere else. So the relationship management in a business is very key.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And in the beginning stages, it's about speed, because you gotta race to a point of profitability. So you gotta go alone a lot of times in those beginning stages. But as you move forward, you gotta go together, or you're gonna stall out. Second one, startup strength, gut decisions. CEOs that start companies are great at this. They understand the business. They know their own numbers. They know their own customers. They know their product, their service. They know what needs to happen to make a sale and how to deliver. They're good at gut decisions. That can only go so far. And as a company grows, those gut decisions become harder and harder to make, because you lose control of what's happening in your business. And you can't be everywhere and everything. And so you have to make this shift to data-driven decisions, data-driven strategies. This is somewhere that my business, Calculated, focuses on. We work with a lot of transforming businesses as they're going from small to mid-sized to large, where they have to transition to a more data-driven structure. And this is hard, but you have to put the good processes in place to make sure that you are getting the data you need in real time to help you make decisions quickly, because business is about speed. It all starts with your accounting, and then it branches out from there. I can't tell you how many mid-sized companies have horrible accounting and really don't know what's going on in their business. We just took on a client this last year. They were doing about $10 million. They're in the healthcare space, about $10 million a year. They had never looked at a financial statement. They didn't know, the management did not know what a balance sheet was. And I was shocked that they got to $10 million. That doesn't happen very often. But they had hit a point where they were losing money, losing cash, and they had no idea why. Because they'd never looked at a margin. They'd never looked at an income statement. They didn't know what income statement meant. We got in, we cleaned up their accounting, trained them on how to use it. We quickly found out that their labor rates were double than they should have been. And we restructured their entire model around their labor, and they were back into profitability pretty quick. But you have to be diligent in making sure that your accounting is getting done accurately, that it's structured relevantly for decision making, and that it's timely. And then once you get that centered in, you can then start to build out dashboards and KPIs. You can dive deeper into a lot bigger data sets, but it all starts out with your accounting and metrics.
Yeah, I had a business owner that I knew that grew really quickly. He wanted to increase the valuation by a couple $1 million. He was successful at really bringing in some other service lines and growing revenue. He was doing his monthly financial reporting, but financials can sometimes be a lag, and we don't really work out some of the things that are happening in a business until the year end. And so he increased the revenue by, I think, $5 million and lost $500,000 that year. He almost lost his bonding and his line of credit, and it almost put him out of business. And it was because of these new services. He grew so fast, so quickly, and he did not have the data to be able to monitor that these new services were even making money. And they ended up not making money, and he almost went out of business. So, especially with growth businesses, I think that you cannot rely on your gut.
How much did that hurt his exit?
That hurt his exit by, he wanted to do a $5 million exit. He didn't actually get anything up front, and he ended up selling the business and having to have an earn out over time and continue to work in it. So he went from a sellable $3 million business to pretty much barely anything overnight. It was really sad.
Let's see here. There we go. Another one, a common one we see, a mindset shift that business owners have a hard time making is the idea of taxes. In the beginning, as a startup company, your focus should be on tax minimization. You got to do everything to hoard cash, and that means also planning well to make sure your tax bill is minimum. And you see this a lot in startup businesses, right? You got every one of your kids' vehicles on your books. Your travel expense and your uniform expense pretty high because your whole wardrobe is on there. You're trying to find ways to reduce that profitability to keep your taxes low, right? However, as you grow, your mindset has to shift around this. You have to see there's worse things than paying taxes, because for every dollar you save on taxes, you're also killing your valuation and your ability to grow at the same time. And I'm not saying not to do tax planning. There's a lot of great ways you can tax plan without killing your cash or killing your profitability. But at some point, you have to make this shift where you're more concerned about the profitable bottom line than you are on the amount of money you're saving in taxes. I have a great example. Right now, I'm dealing with a company that's exiting. They're based out of California. They're doing about $15 million in revenue every year. But the owner has an urgent reason he needs to exit. So he's urgently trying to exit the business. Doesn't really have time to clean things up too much. He has been hyper-focused on saving on taxes over the last 5 years and has done everything he could to make sure that he showed a loss on his books, to make sure he didn't pay taxes. His company should be worth 10 to 15 million, probably around $12 million. He is selling it for around 2.5 million, and he's having a hard time getting that deal done. All because he wanted to save on tax. He probably saved himself $500,000 to $750,000 in taxes over the last 3 years, and he's going to lose out on probably $10 million in an exit. And this is a story that we see over and over and over again. There's worse things than paying taxes.
Yeah, I always say tax minimizing strategies compete directly with value building strategies. And to your point, you spend $1 to save 30 cents, and you're foregoing $3 to $5 in value. So it's the math doesn't really work there, but everybody does this, and I've seen so many people I just met with a business owner that was a construction, and he did the same thing: minimize taxes, buy equipment. He had so much more equipment than he needed, and the return on investment on that asset was so low, and the valuation is low. It's like, well, just go liquidate the equipment. You're going to make more money on that. He's like, but this is a going concern business. And I'm like, you have more equipment than you need. So it's always about matching the revenue and the expenses. I mean, if we're spending money that doesn't earn us revenue, it doesn't do us service in the valuation.
Another startup strength, as a startup CEO, you should be trying to take on a lot of customers, right? And because you're in a testing mode, you're trying to, one, get revenue quickly so you can start to expand your company. And two, you want to get a bunch of different kind of customers so you can test, you can kind of nail down who your target market is and figure out that product market fit, right? That's a good strategy as a startup CEO. But as you grow, you have to quickly start to shift into finding the right ideal customer. As you grow, you have to focus more on niche. You got to focus more on profitability, and finding the right customer fit becomes much more important around this area. Scaling companies that take on every client almost always fail. And a big part of that problem is opportunity cost. You end up spending a lot of time dealing with the customers that are not the right fit for you because you weren't able to say no. It causes you to ignore giving good value to the right customers who are your right fit. And you end up spreading yourself too thin and serving no one well.
I have a great story about this one. It was a CPA firm I was doing some consulting work for, and he was maxed out, like no more time in the day, couldn't file any more tax returns, wasn't making very much money. We went and did a price study, and we packaged his services, sent out letters. A lot of the clients exited themselves, said this is too much and I don't need this many services. So we were just focusing on the types of clients he wanted to service. He ended up reducing his clients by 30% and making like $20,000 more that year. So he was able to pull himself out of the business. He went and merged with another firm and grew the firm, but he wasn't able to grow because he was at capacity. So we actually tracked every single client that stayed with him and realized at the end of the day that he had reduced work and had more money and more profit.
You have to continue to be focusing on who your target market is and practicing that ability to say no to those that are not in your target market. Risk taking, as a startup, starting a company is one of the most risky ventures you can take on, right? The future is not visible. There's no proven path. You're kind of all in. It's high stakes, and there's not much you can do to avoid that risk in the beginning. You have to be okay with that, and you have to embrace that, and you have to understand that's part of the game of startup. However, as you grow your business, you start to grow an asset that's worth protecting, and you have to find the right balance between risk taking and protecting what you have. And so there's a risk mitigation, a de-risking type of process that you have to start to develop as a company that allows you to stabilize and grow in a more efficient manner, I guess you could say. And this is a problem where a lot of startup CEOs have a hard time flipping.
Yeah, valuation is very simple. It's what are you buying, which is usually cash flow, and what is the risk of it transferring to a new buyer, and what are the growth opportunities. Those are the three things that we focus on in valuation. We have different methods of addressing those three categories. And mitigating risk in a business, there's some of the best outcomes I have is when a business owner comes to me and they want to sell because they're burnt out. And we go and do this analysis, and I say, you can't sell it because we have all these risk factors that we need to address. And we address them, and then they go, I love my business again. I think I'm going to keep it. So the risk factors are usually what the struggle in the business is. It's a lot of operational type things. And the other thing I like to say about valuation, you might be running a great business. You might be you can cross the finish line and keep running. But people don't know in business, they have this valuable asset. And if I were to ask you, will you invest in this project? Most people would say, well, how much money do you want me to invest? What's my return on investment? When am I getting my money back? We have this incredible investment in our businesses. The statistic is 85% of a business owner's net worth is tied up in their business. They have no idea how much it's worth, no idea if they're building value, no idea if it's sellable. So finding that out helps mitigate the risk, because you'll never make a decision again once you understand the value drivers in your business, which a lot of it is the risk factors.
We've got about 5 minutes left. So we'll just kind of go through a few more of these. We won't go in detail, but startup strength is, in the beginning, it's all about focusing on your product, making sure it fits with the market, that the market wants to buy what you're selling, and that you're tweaking that product or service consistently. As you move on, it becomes more about building out systems and teams and processes that help you scale. Also, frugality in the beginning is your strength. You've got to do everything you can to do things cheaply and hoard cash. That mentality will kill you as you grow, because you have to be willing to invest and really find strategic ways to invest in your growth. Speed and chaos in the beginning is a strength. Long term, it becomes more about structure and accountability. And then your relationships as a business owner in the beginning, it's a real strength to have personal relationships in the beginning. As you grow and scale and try to exit, it becomes more about the institutional relationships that the company has. You want to talk anything about this?
Yeah. So, buyers, they want to pay for those turnkey businesses. They can just hand over the keys. And the key to it is you can maximize the valuation by bringing a lot of buyers to the table. And the more turnkey you get your business, the more buyers that will come to the table. And they really look for leadership, and leadership that produces predictable cash flow. But the discounts, unpredictability kills valuation. If we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, then if I can't buy something from you and replicate what you've done once you leave, that's the risk factor. And so we're always trying to, address that.
So in summary, one thing is understand what stage of growth you're in, and then we call it act your stage. That's a big part of understanding how to grow and be a successful business owner. You have to know what stage you're in, and you have to act differently depending on what stage you're in. You have to evolve yourself, and you have to let your business evolve. You have to continually be working on that evolution. Let go of what made you successful. What was your strength in the beginning is going to be your weakness as you scale. And, build that company that runs without you.
Yeah, let go of what made you successful. I think that what people tend to do is they gravitate to the things in the business that they're good at and they excel at, and they ignore the things that they're not. And they tend to hire people that are like them, that support their thinking and their vision. And then you see these big gaps in the company and the leadership. And so kind of assessing that, I like doing these things. I'm not good at these. Let's bring in some other people that can, help with the business. I see that to be very unbalanced. And, building a company that runs without you is so much easier for someone that doesn't start it. I see people that buy businesses and grow them and sell them, and they don't have a hard time with that. It's us founders that developed an idea from our garages that have a really hard time stepping out of the company because they love running it. They love being in it, and it's their identity. But it is really difficult in an exit unless you decide that you want to be an employee, and business owners make terrible employees.
Okay, we just want to encourage you guys, if you're running a business, really identify some of these areas where you might be needing to transform and you're not. Identify those, ask, how would my business do in an acquisition? Are the key factors that a buyer would look at? How do we grade there? And then let's choose your first stage and start shifting toward that transformation today. So that's what we got. We're happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you. Yep.
So if people are interested in buying a business, do people come to you or say something that you know getting a business you're looking for sale? Or is that
Yes, that I match make quite a bit because I am working with 25 different businesses in various states. They're not all already prepared. I say I'm not a catalog. I'm not a business broker. So I qualify the buyers, but if I find someone that's like, I'm looking for an HVAC company at this size and this is my qualification, this is where I'm getting the money, then absolutely, I definitely will. We don't have to go to market and bring in a broker. It's a lot less expensive, and I've done that many times, yes.
Yeah, I think that's a very involved question, and it's an important part of business growth is the funding, right? And I think the first thing I would say is you have to recognize it takes time. I've heard multiple speakers say everyone wants to jump to scale stage right away, right? And building a business is a process, and there really is no such thing as an overnight business. So one thing to understand is we have to take this one bite at a time and be able to fund our growth one moment at a time. However, there are options out there that we need to look into, right? Whether it's equity, debt, or bootstrap, and there's different models there, and you need to understand what type of business you're running and what kind of growth plan you're going to be building, and whether it's going to be based off of one of those funding models.
Yeah, I think talking to banks, I know everyone wants to stay away from debt, and in your personal life, that's a good policy, but with business, it's not. Leveraging debt is actually really good if you're doing it strategically. Talking with a bank, having a good banking partner when you don't need it. Banks are never going to lend you give you an umbrella when you don't need it, right? They're only going to give it to you when you don't need it. They're not going to give it to you when you need it. So having those small relationships and getting a line of credit, and that way when you have an opportunity and you need to go get some funding, if it's debt financing, you've already got a relationship established and they already know you and they're helping guide you. The equity play is hard. I really dissuade people from bringing in equity partners just to raise money. It's just cheaper to be in debt and manage that and be strategic about it.
The equity can make sense if you're in the right stage and the right type of business, but most businesses don't fit that, right? If you've got everything in line and you're ready to scale because you've got the right team and the right formula and you've really nailed down the marketing and you have a scalable industry, then the equity money can make sense to come in and really put gasoline on the fire to scale it.
Just have an exit plan for your equity partner.
Over here.
So I've done 5 acquisitions in the last 4 years.
Okay.
I really enjoy it. It's a bear, it's a roller coaster, but I really enjoy it. But my question more so is, how long do I need to hold on to it before I sell it again? Because we've grown all of these companies, and it's great. But some of them I'm ready to offload so I can go do it again and maybe take a bigger jump. And so, how long do I need to hold on to it to make it attractive to the next client?
Usually 3 to 5 years. It's kind of a rule of thumb because we always look at 3 years. And they're going to want to look at your 3-year performance under your stewardship and how you've grown it, what you've done, your impact. But 3 years.
And do I share what the previous owner did if I'm at that 3-year mark? They ask for 5.
They don't usually. We usually just look at 3, sometimes 5, but mostly 3. And looking more, hey, have you had some growth? Have you had consistent earnings, margins, and a plan forward? Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys. Really appreciate your time.